The quantum detection grid lit up like a Christmas tree at exactly 3:47 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Dr. Sarah Chen stared at the holographic display floating above her desk in the depths of the Titan research station, her coffee forgotten in her hand. The signal patterns were unmistakable. A massive object had just dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system. Director Chen, the station's AI announced with characteristic calm, preliminary analysis confirms the signature matches theoretical models for Alcubierre drive technology. The vessel's mass suggests a capital ship, approximately 3 kilometers in length. Sarah allowed herself a small smile. 20 years of preparation, and humanity's visitors had finally arrived. Alert Defense Command, Implementation Protocol Sigma, and patch me through to Admiral Rodriguez. The holographic display shifted, revealing the weathered face of Admiral Isabella Rodriguez, her silver hair tied back in a severe bun. She was already in full uniform despite the early hour. "They're right on schedule, Sarah. The probability engines were spot on." "As usual," Sarah replied, pulling up additional data streams with a gesture. Initial scans suggest their technology base aligns with the Centauri Archive predictions. Standard configuration for a Level 3 civilization, following the common galactic development path. "And that's exactly why they won't see us coming," Isabella said, her expression grim. "Are you ready to play your part?" Sarah nodded, already pulling up the carefully crafted facade they'd prepared. On paper, Earth would appear to be exactly what the aliens would expect. A young civilization just beginning to explore their solar system, using primitive chemical rockets and early fusion technology. The reality, carefully hidden beneath quantum stealth fields and dimensional pocket technology, was very different. The alien vessel was now close enough for detailed scanning. Its design was elegant, all sweeping curves and crystalline structures. Exactly the kind of ship a civilization would build if they'd never faced serious military competition. Sarah's team had been studying similar designs for 2 decades, ever since they'd discovered the Centauri Archive buried beneath the Martian ice caps. "They're broadcasting," the AI announced. "Standard first contact protocols, using basic electromagnetic signals. The language pattern matches the galactic common predicted by the archive." "Send the prepared response," Isabella ordered. "Remember, everyone, we're a young, eager species, excited but slightly nervous about first contact. Dr. Chen, you're our wide-eyed scientist, amazed by their technology. Let's give them exactly what they expect to see." Sarah began changing into her carefully selected outfit, deliberately a few years out of date, with visible seams and natural fibers. The kind of clothing a primitive human scientist would wear. The deception had to be perfect, down to the smallest detail. The alien ship, which they now knew called itself the Star Seeker, established orbit exactly where their probability engines had predicted. Right above the carefully maintained primary space station, itself a convincing decoy that hid the true extent of human space infrastructure. As Sarah prepared to board the shuttle that would take her to the diplomatic meeting, she thought about the real human fleet, hidden in dimensional pockets throughout the solar system. Ships that combine technologies from 3 different alien archives, enhanced by human innovation, and tested in secret for over a decade. The aliens thought they were making first contact with a young species. In reality, they were walking into humanity's carefully laid trap. "Remember," Isabella's voice came through her secure comlink, "we need to understand their intentions. The probability engines suggest a 78% chance they're part of the Helixian Empire, but we need confirmation. If they're here to peacefully welcome us to the galactic community, fine. But if they're here to subjugate or guide us, then they'll learn why humanity is still here while the Centauri, the predecessors, and the archivists are all extinct." Sarah finished. "Don't worry, Admiral. I've been preparing for this performance my entire career." The shuttle lifted off, its seemingly primitive chemical engines masking the quantum drive beneath. As they approached the meeting point, Sarah watched the alien ship grow larger in the viewport. Its crew had no idea that every quantum fluctuation, every energy signature, every communication was being analyzed and compared to the vast database humanity had built. The Star Seeker was about to meet a civilization that had spent 20 years preparing for this exact moment. Sarah almost felt sorry for them. Almost. The Star Seeker was about to meet a civilization that had spent 20 years preparing for this exact moment. Sarah almost felt sorry for them. Almost. Because beneath her carefully crafted exterior of wide-eyed wonder, she knew the truth. Humanity wasn't just ready for the stars. They were ready for war. And if the Halixian Empire proved to be the threat they feared, they would learn why Earth had survived while other civilizations had fallen. The game was about to begin, and humanity was holding all the cards. They just had to play them perfectly. High Commander Varric stood on the command deck of the Star Seeker, his iridescent scales shifting through shades of deep blue as he studied the holographic representation of Earth before him. The planet's primitive orbital infrastructure floated in carefully mapped patterns: chemical rockets, basic satellites, and a single orbital station that barely deserved the name. Fascinating, his chief xenobiologist, Dr. Lyra, murmured beside him. They've achieved spaceflight without even mastering basic gravitics. Their determination is remarkable, if inefficient. Her tentacles waved in what the crew recognized as amusement. Varric kept his expression neutral, but inwardly he felt satisfaction. Everything was proceeding according to standard protocols for integrating a young species into the Halixian Empire. The humans had responded to their arrival with appropriate awe and excitement, eager to learn from their advanced visitors. The human representative is approaching, his second-in-command announced. Their shuttle is using chemical propulsion. Scans confirm no shielding technology beyond basic radiation protection. The shuttle docked with their ship in an almost painfully slow process. Varric watched through multiple sensor feeds as their guest, a human female scientist named Dr. Chen, was escorted to the diplomatic chamber. Her wide-eyed expression and barely contained excitement were exactly what he expected from a primitive encountering superior technology. "Welcome aboard the Star Seeker, Dr. Chen." Varric greeted her in perfectly translated Galactic Common. "We are honored to make first contact with your species." The human's response was perfect. Amazement at their universal translator, enthusiasm about their technology, and carefully phrased questions that revealed both intelligence and ignorance. Varric felt his secondary hearts beat with pride. This was why the Halixian Empire had ruled the galaxy for 10,000 years. They knew exactly how to guide young species into proper development. But something kept nagging at the edge of his consciousness. The human's questions, while seemingly naive, demonstrated an unusually thorough understanding of theoretical physics, and occasionally, just occasionally, he caught a glint in her eye that seemed knowing. "Your species has achieved much in a short time," he said carefully, watching her reaction. "Though your methods are unconventional. We've had to be creative." Dr. Chen replied with what appeared to be humility. "Earth has limited resources, and we've had to make the most of what we have." Dr. Lyra interjected, her tentacles rippling with academic interest. "We've noticed your species pursues multiple technological paths simultaneously, rather than focusing on perfecting each step. Most inefficient, but impressively adaptable. Necessity is the mother of invention." Dr. Chen said with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "We've learned to try everything that might work." Later, after the human had departed, Varric reviewed the meeting recordings with his senior staff. "Thoughts?" he asked his cultural integration specialist. "They're perfect candidates for integration," the specialist replied. "Intelligent enough to be useful, primitive enough to be guided. Standard Protocol 7 should suffice." Varric wasn't so sure. He kept returning to small details, the way Dr. Chen's eyes had lingered on certain pieces of technology, the precision of her questions about their FTL drive, the subtle ways she had directed the conversation away from certain topics. "Launch deep scan probes," he ordered suddenly. "I want a complete analysis of their solar system." "Sir," His second-in-command questioned. "Our surface scans show nothing beyond standard development patterns." "Humor me," Varix replied, his scales shifting to a troubled green. "Something doesn't feel right." The probes launched silently, their quantum sensors reaching out to map Earth's solar system in detail. For hours, everything proceeded normally. Then, at the edge of their scanning range, a probe detected an anomaly, a quantum fluctuation that shouldn't exist in a system at this level of development. Before they could focus their sensors on the anomaly, it vanished. When they reviewed the data, there was nothing to confirm what the probe had detected. But Varix's unease grew. "Send a message to the Empire," he commanded. "Request additional ships for a full cultural integration assessment." "Sir, is that necessary?" his second-in-command asked. "They're clearly a young species, barely able to reach their own moon." Varix stared at the holographic image of Earth, rotating slowly in space. "Perhaps," he said slowly, "or perhaps they want us to think that." In her shuttle returning to Earth, Dr. Chen received a quantum-encrypted message from Admiral Rodriguez. "They took the bait. Probe detected exactly what we wanted it to detect." Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The game was proceeding exactly as their probability engines had predicted. The Halixian Empire was about to commit significant forces to investigate Earth, forces that would arrive to find something very different from what they expected. The trap was almost ready to spring. All they needed was for the Empire to make the first aggressive move, and humanity would have its justification for revealing just how primitive they really were. The Halixian reinforcement fleet arrived exactly as humanity's probability engines had predicted. 12 massive warships dropped out of FTL travel in perfect formation, their crystalline hulls gleaming in the sunlight. From Earth's primitive orbital station, the display of power was meant to be intimidating. Admiral Isabella Rodriguez watched the feed from her real command center, buried deep within Titan's crust. "They certainly know how to make an entrance," she commented to her staff. "Status of our hidden assets. All fleet elements in position," her tactical officer reported. "Dimensional pocket generators functioning perfectly. The Halixians are detecting exactly what we want them to see." On the Starseeker, High Commander Varix felt his scales ripple with satisfaction as the reinforcement fleet took up strategic positions around Earth. The human leadership had been summoned for an important diplomatic announcement, one that would begin their integration into the Empire whether they wished it or not. Dr. Sarah Chen's shuttle approached the Starseeker once again, this time accompanied by what appeared to be Earth's senior military leader, a graying human male in a primitive pressure suit. The Halixians had magnanimously provided a basic atmospheric shield to allow the humans to dock without their cumbersome equipment. "Welcome back, Dr. Chen." Varix greeted them in the diplomatic chamber. "And welcome, General." He paused, checking his translator. "General Marcus Zhang," the human male supplied, looking appropriately awed by his surroundings. "We're honored by your impressive display of ships." Varix gestured to the assembled Halixian commanders, their scales shimmering with barely concealed superiority. "The Halixian Empire has decided to accelerate Earth's integration into the galactic community. Your species shows promise, but your technological development is dangerously unfocused. We will provide guidance to ensure you develop along proper lines." He waited for the expected response, gratitude mixed with humble acceptance. Instead, Dr. Chen and General Zhang exchanged a look that made Varix's secondary hearts skip a beat. "About that," Sarah said, her earlier wide-eyed innocence vanishing like morning dew. "We have an alternative proposal." Varix felt his scales shift to warning red. "This is not a negotiation, Dr. Chen. The Empire has vastly overestimated its position." General Zhang interrupted, his voice suddenly carrying the weight of command. "Admiral Rodriguez sends her regards and suggests you take a closer look at your sensor readings. The real ones, not the filtered data we've been feeding you." Before Varix could respond, his tactical officer burst into the chamber. Commander, we're detecting massive energy signatures throughout the system. Something's happening to space itself. Throughout the solar system, dozens of dimensional pockets began to open. From these impossible tiers in reality emerged humanity's true fleet. The ships were unlike anything the Halixians had ever seen. Angular, aggressive, and bristling with weapons that combined technologies that should have been incompatible. Impossible, Dr. Lyra whispered, her tentacles writhing in distress as she studied the readings. They're using quantum field technology alongside gravitational manipulation. The power signatures suggest multiple technological bases. Sarah finished for her, smiling. Turns out studying everything at once isn't so inefficient after all. On Titan, Admiral Rodriguez opened a channel to the entire Halixian fleet. Her hologram appeared in every command center, every bridge, and every diplomatic chamber. This is Admiral Isabella Rodriguez of the Earth Defense Force. For the past 20 years, humanity has been preparing for this moment. We know about the Empire's history of integrating young civilizations. We know about the worlds you've stripped of resources and the cultures you've erased in the name of proper development. Varix found his voice at last. You cannot possibly have developed this level of technology on your own. The Empire has monitored your world for centuries. We would have detected what you expected to detect. General John cut in. Humanity's greatest advantage has always been our ability to exceed expectations. Every scan you ran, every probe you sent, showed you exactly what we wanted you to see. The tactical displays told a story that should have been impossible. Human ships had taken up positions that negated every strategic advantage of the Halixian fleet. Their weapons were trained on critical systems that shouldn't have been visible to their level of technology. We're willing to establish diplomatic relations with the Empire, Admiral Rodriguez continued, but as equals, not subjects. Your ships are currently targeted by weapons you don't understand, using principles your scientists haven't discovered. I suggest you consider your next moves very carefully. In the diplomatic chamber, Sarah watched the play of emotions across Varix's scales. Disbelief, anger, fear, and finally, something that looked like respect. How? He asked simply. Humanity didn't follow your predetermined path of development because we couldn't afford to, Sarah explained. We knew we weren't alone in the galaxy. We knew someone would eventually come to guide us. So we developed everything simultaneously, every crazy theory, every wild idea. Most failed, but the ones that worked, well, you're seeing the results. The Halixian Empire had arrived expecting to find a primitive species ready for harvesting. Instead, they found themselves facing a civilization that had turned their greatest weakness, their technological inferiority, into their greatest strength. Humanity hadn't just caught up to the galaxy's standards. They had blazed their own path and created something entirely new in the process. The game had changed, and the galaxy would never be the same. The first shot wasn't fired by either fleet. Instead, it came from a lone Halixian cruiser captain whose pride overwhelmed his judgment. The energy beam lanced out toward what appeared to be a vulnerable human support vessel, only to pass straight through a holographic projection while the real ship emerged from a dimensional pocket behind the cruiser. Hold fire, Admiral Rodriguez commanded as her fleet's targeting systems locked onto every Halixian vessel. Let's show them what real restraint looks like. The human ship that had been targeted didn't return fire. Instead, it projected a quantum field that completely immobilized the offending cruiser, leaving it dead in space without damaging a single system. The demonstration was precise, elegant, and terrifying in its implications. On the Starseeker's bridge, High Commander Varix watched the incident unfold with a mixture of horror and fascination. The human technology wasn't just advanced, it was impossible. Their ships seemed to ignore fundamental laws of physics that the Empire had built their entire civilization around. Commander, his tactical officer reported, voice trembling. Analysis of their weapon systems suggests they're using at least 3 distinct technological bases simultaneously. The power signatures don't make sense. They should be tearing themselves apart. In the diplomatic chamber, Dr. Sarah Chen watched Verix's reaction through augmented reality overlays that analyzed every shift in his scale coloration. "You're wondering how we did it," she said softly. "How we managed to combine technologies that should be mutually exclusive. The Empire has ruled space for 10,000 years. Verix responded, his scales shifting through patterns of confusion and anger. "We have guided hundreds of species to proper development. What you're doing, it violates every principle of technological progression." "That's exactly why it works," General Zhang interrupted. "Your empire became so focused on the proper way of doing things that you stopped innovating. You forgot that necessity breeds invention. And humanity had the greatest necessity of all: survival." Throughout the solar system, the human fleet continued its elaborate dance around the Helixian ships. Each movement revealed new capabilities that defied Imperial understanding. Ships phased through solid matter. Weapons bypassed advanced shields as if they weren't there. And sensor systems penetrated defenses that had been impregnable for millennia. "You have to understand," Sarah continued, "while you were watching us develop primitive chemical rockets, we were actually studying quantum mechanics. While you monitored our crude nuclear fission plants, we were mastering dimensional engineering. Everything you saw was a carefully constructed facade." Admiral Rodriguez's voice cut through all communications channels again. "To the Helixian fleet, your cruiser captain acted rashly, but we chose not to respond with force. Consider that a demonstration of our intentions. We don't want war, we want recognition. Recognition that there's more than one path to the stars." In his command center on the furthest Helixian dreadnought, Fleet Admiral Xeris watched the tactical displays with growing dread. His entire battle group, the pride of the Imperial fleet, had been effectively neutralized without a single casualty. The humans had weapons locked on every critical system, yet they hadn't fired a shot. "High Commander," Xeris called, his voice carrying the weight of 10,000 years of Imperial authority, "the humans have made their point. Any aggressive action on our part would be unwise." Verix felt the last of his certainty crumble. Everything the Empire knew about technological development, everything they had used to justify their guidance of younger species, had been upended in a single day. These humans hadn't just developed advanced technology. They had fundamentally changed the rules of what was possible. "There will be those in the Empire who won't accept this," he warned Sarah. "They won't be able to comprehend a species that didn't follow the prescribed path." "We know," Sarah replied, her expression serious. "Our probability engines have modeled multiple scenarios. That's why we're not just showing you our strength. We're showing you our restraint. We could have emerged from hiding with an overwhelming attack. Instead, we're offering a chance for something new." As if to emphasize her point, the immobilized Helixian cruiser suddenly found itself free, its systems completely restored. The human vessel that had disabled it moved back into formation, its weapons powered down in a clear gesture of peace. "Your empire has spent millennia guiding younger species down a single path," General Zhang said. "We're offering you the chance to learn something new. The galaxy is bigger than any one way of thinking." The Helixian fleet hung in space, their perfect formation now seeming less like a display of power and more like a relic of outdated thinking. Humanity had just rewritten the rules of galactic civilization, not through conquest or dominance, but through innovation and the courage to try the impossible. The next move belonged to the Empire, but for the first time in 10,000 years, they weren't the ones dictating the terms. 6 months after the standoff in Earth's solar system, the Great Hall of the Helixian Imperial Palace hosted an unprecedented gathering. Representatives from 100 alien species filled the crystalline chamber, their attention focused on the human delegation standing before the Imperial Council. Dr. Sarah Chen stood alongside Admiral Rodriguez and General Zhang, facing the assembled might of galactic civilization. The Empire's leadership had changed. High Commander Verix now sat among the Imperial Council, his scales shimmering with the deep blue of wisdom gained through humility. "The galaxy stands at a crossroads," the first speaker announced, his ancient voice carrying across the chamber. For 10,000 years, the Empire has guided younger species along what we believed was the only path to the stars. Humanity has proven us wrong. Admiral Rodriguez stepped forward, her uniform bearing new insignia that represented Earth's status as an independent power. "We didn't come here to destroy what you've built," she said. "We came to show you there's more than one way to reach the future." The evidence was undeniable. In the months since first contact, human innovations had already begun transforming galactic society. Ships incorporating hybrid technology were under construction in orbital yards throughout the Empire. Young civilizations were being offered choices in their development paths rather than rigid guidance. The human approach to technological development has challenged our most fundamental assumptions. Dr. Lyra addressed the assembly, her tentacles moving in patterns of academic excitement. Their willingness to pursue multiple paths simultaneously, to combine seemingly incompatible technologies, has opened new frontiers in scientific understanding. But not everyone welcomed the change. A faction of conservative imperial leaders had opposed the new direction, clinging to the old ways. They had attempted to organize resistance, only to find that humanity's probability engines had predicted their every move. Change is never easy, Sarah acknowledged, addressing the concerns that hung unspoken in the chamber. But stagnation is a greater threat than innovation. The Empire survived for 10,000 years by guiding others. Perhaps now it's time to learn from them as well. The implications reached far beyond technology. Cultural exchange programs had begun, bringing diverse perspectives to worlds that had known only the imperial way for millennia. Young species were being encouraged to maintain their unique approaches to problem-solving, rather than conform to a single standard. "We propose a new framework for galactic civilization," General Zhang announced. "Not an empire of guidance, but a federation of equals, each species contributing their unique perspectives and innovations to the greater whole." The proposal sparked intense discussion throughout the chamber. Some representatives appeared troubled by the radical departure from tradition, while others showed clear enthusiasm for the new possibilities. High Commander Varix rose to speak, his scales now showing the complex patterns of one who had seen his worldview completely transformed. 6 months ago, I commanded a fleet that intended to force humanity into compliance with our standards. Today, I stand before you as living proof that even the oldest among us can learn new ways of thinking. The changes were already visible in the very chamber where they stood. Alongside the traditional crystalline architecture of the Empire, quantum field generators of human design maintained environmental conditions for 100 different species simultaneously. It was a small but powerful symbol of how different technologies could work together. But this isn't just about technology, Admiral Rodriguez continued. It's about recognizing that diversity, of thought, of approach, of culture, isn't a weakness to be corrected. It's a strength to be embraced. As if to emphasize her point, a holographic display activated, showing new ships under construction throughout the galaxy. They weren't purely human designs or imperial designs, but a fusion of multiple technological approaches. Each incorporated innovations from different species, creating something greater than any single civilization could have achieved alone. "The stars aren't just for those who follow a single path," Sarah concluded. "They're for everyone who dares to look up and dream differently." The assembly erupted in a chorus of voices, each species adding their own thoughts to the historic moment. The galaxy was changing, not through conquest or force, but through the simple proof that there was more than one way to reach the future. In Earth's solar system, humanity's first hybrid technology shipyards were already producing vessels that would carry their children to the stars. But they wouldn't go as conquerors or subjects. They would go as equals, ready to learn as much as they taught. The galaxy had been forever changed by a species that dared to break convention, to try the impossible, to believe that the rules weren't really rules at all, just one way of doing things among countless possibilities. And in the end, that was humanity's greatest contribution to the galaxy. Not their technology, not their weapons, but the simple, powerful idea that the future belonged to those who were brave enough to imagine it differently.